Well, shalom. My name is Todd Bennett, and I am recording the weekly Shabbat newsletter entitled There Will Be Weeping and Gnashing of Teeth. This was first published on day 10 of month 12 on the Creator's calendar, also known as February 12th, 2022 on the Roman calendar. Now, if you received the newsletter, there would be a link to the day 10 of month 12 date, and that's to take you to torahcalendar.com, and that shows how the Creator's calendar actually correlates with the Gregorian calendar. And I recommend that you actually visit that site if you want to take note of that yourself and learn more about the calendar. You can go to www.torahcalendar.com, and up at the top, if you just put in, for instance, February 12th, 2022, and go to the calendar, it'll bring you to the correlated date, which would be month 12. So it would show you the entire month 12, and then you could see that February 12th actually falls on day 10 of month 12 on the Creator's calendar. So it's a great resource, a great site. I encourage you to go there if you are interested in learning more about the Creator's calendar, since it is something that the wise should be doing, and we've talked about that for the past couple weeks now. Now, as you know, I often speak of the pagan origins of the Roman Gregorian calendar, and of course, it's hard not to see aspects of ancient pagan culture consuming this modern society. It's all around us. And the interesting thing is, most people don't realize it. I grew up most of my life in the Christian church, thinking the pagans were everybody else. The pagans were the, earth worshipers and the nature worshipers and the tree huggers and all that. But essentially, there are many pagan aspects of religion and worship that have infiltrated into the Christian religion. For instance, today is the Sabbath. It's a set-apart day of rest established by the Creator during the process of creation. So anyone who's read past the first chapter of Genesis should know that the seventh day is the Sabbath. And I'll read Genesis 2, 1 through 3. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of heaven were finished. And on the seventh day Elohim ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then Elohim blessed the seventh day and set it apart, because in it he rested from all his work which Elohim had created and made. Now, despite the corruption of time, most calendars still show Sunday as the first day of the week and Saturday as the seventh day of the week. If you look at a typical wall calendar, now some are changing, I've noticed over the years, but traditionally, if you looked at a wall calendar or desk calendar, you would see that on the far left it would start, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday through Saturday. So Sunday is the first day, Saturday is the seventh day, and then, you go down to the next row and start the cycle again. This is a cycle that we've seen since the beginning of time, and nothing has changed regarding that. Even when they did modify the Gregorian calendar, they never changed the day cycle. There was a 10-day change at one point, but they've never changed this pattern of sevens that have began since creation. Sunday is the first day because it's called Sunday because it's the most important day in sun worship. Saturday, the seventh day, is a name ascribed to Saturn because Saturn is the seventh celestial body from the sun, including the sun. So Saturday is Saturn's day, and the pagans have distorted the name and the meaning of the Sabbath to conform to their pagan solar calendar. Instead of a day of rest in honor of the Creator, it has become a day of work, shopping, and recreation. Now, the commandment for those who follow Yahweh is as follows. 6 days shall work be done. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a set-apart rehearsal. You shall do no work on it. It is the Sabbath of Yahweh in all your dwellings. Leviticus 23:3. So we are commanded to work 6 days, Sunday through Friday. We then rest on the seventh day and make our homes into set-apart places. Well, kind of like the Garden of Eden. I've talked about that before. The Sabbath is our little time of trying to rehearse going back to the garden, where Yah can come and fellowship with us while we rest. And of course, that's why we put the mezuzah, the commandments, on our doorposts and on our gates, because what we're doing is we're setting our property apart. We're saying to the world, and we're announcing with these, the signs on our gates and on our door, that this is a sacred space. This is a set-apart place. This is where the commandments of Elohim are abided by, and so therefore Elohim is welcome to come and dwell in that set-apart space. It's a beautiful pattern of the plan that Yah has for his people, and that's why it's called a set-apart rehearsal, a kadosh mikra in Hebrew. The entire plan of Elohim is actually encapsulated within this weekly cycle, and I talk about that a lot in my teachings and my books, and especially the book, Walk in the Light book, Appointed Times, where we talk about time and how time has patterns built into it, which show us the plan of Elohim, and it begins with that weekly cycle, which is a pattern for a cycle of jubilees, and then ultimately the millennium, sixth millennium, which is 120 jubilees, followed by the seventh millennium, the Sabbath rest, 1,000 years, which is the time when Yeshua will reign and the earth will rest with the oversight of Yeshua. So, where are you when Yah comes knocking on the Sabbath is a question that we need to ask ourselves. And consider the message given to the assembly of Laodicea from the book of Revelation. And to the messenger of the assembly of the Laodiceans write, these things say the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of Elohim. I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Therefore be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and dine with him, and he with me. Now, this was an actual assembly of believers, and you can do an entire teaching on the topics that are brought up in this, because they correlate to this specific location in Asia Minor, and this is one of the assemblies that was under the authority of John. So that's why John was given this vision of Revelation, because these assemblies were actual, literal assemblies that he oversaw. In any event, many people try to apply them to future, churches, future eras, but we can take things from all of these different congregations and apply them to us. And the Laodiceans were very wealthy, and of course, we live in a prosperous culture, likely the most prosperous in our known history, even more so than the Laodiceans. So we can glean from this and how appropriate this message actually is for Western Christianity and Western Christians. Yeshua says he's standing at the door and knocking, and that's what he does to us on Shabbat in particular. And So the question is, are you in your set apart dwelling prepared to let him come in? Or are you outside mowing your lawn, washing your car, eating out, or shopping? He who has ears, let him hear. And that is a common theme of the book of Revelation. And we need to have ears to hear right now that much of this message is for us. The lukewarm are on the broad way that leads to destruction. He vomits them out. He depart from me. He doesn't want them around him. The zealous are on the narrow way. So each week we have an opportunity to repent, reset our walk with Elohim, and get in synchronicity with him. And it's the sign that we exhibit to the world. The Sabbath is described as a sign. And so as the rest of the world goes about, busying themselves with the cares of the world, and they see us, resting and not working, being set apart, that is a sign to the world that we honor Elohim and we obey Elohim. As he rested on the seventh day, so do we. And let's face it, there's nothing that important that if the creator of the universe can take a day off and rest that we can. Okay, so there's no excuse really for not resting on Shabbat. And it's an amazing gift. Most people struggle with it at the beginning. Well, how am I gonna, that's my day to get everything done. How am I gonna rest on that day when I work all week and need to get all these things done on the weekend and all that? Well, after you start doing it and set all those cares aside, you start looking forward to it and you start to realize, wow, what a blessing this is. And there's actually been studies that have shown how physically, mentally, emotionally, how healthy it is to actually rest one day a week. And so it's a gift. The Sabbath is a gift. It's interesting because this past week I've had a lot of opportunities to actually talk about the Sabbath, and I suppose that's why I'm emphasizing it today. I have a variety of Christian contractors on the property that we're developing for some cattle, and so we have some Christian contractors doing some bulldozing and helping us with some projects. And when I tell them that we don't work on the Sabbath and we can't allow anybody to work on our property on the Sabbath, it's usually met with an inquisitive look followed by the question, well, I thought Sunday was the Sabbath, because where I'm at in South Texas, most things are shut down on Sunday. I mean, people treat Sunday as a Sabbath. And so the idea that Saturday is the Sabbath is quite foreign to some people. So once they ask that question, you're kind of teeing up to hit a home run there. I feel like Babe Ruth, winding up to just hit one out of the park, because I'm so happy when somebody asks that question, because traditions are so powerful that they most never even think about the fourth commandment, that the Sabbath is the seventh day, or Leviticus 23 that I just read. Even though it says it in Genesis, seventh day, most people don't correlate that they're actually treating Sunday as a Sabbath that they've learned through Christianity, and they don't even think about Saturday being the Sabbath. So when they finally ask that question, the response is really quite simple. I say, well, if you think the Pope and the Catholic Church have the authority to change the commandments, then I suppose Sunday is your Sabbath. I don't follow the Pope. I follow the Creator of the universe, and he says that the seventh day is the Sabbath, not the first day. And of course, most people don't realize that this change comes right from the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church indicated that they have the power to change the commandments, and because they have the power to change the Sabbath, that's a demonstration of their authority. So it's kind of a circular reasoning that they have invoked there, but it's just simply not true. And if the person seems interested, that they want to know more, I usually hand them my book titled The Sabbath. And this is a good opportunity for me to just indicate, when I first wrote the Walk in Light series and I outlined it and I was working on it, it was going to be one book, and every one of the books were going to be a chapter. And then I realized, well, each one of these chapters is a subject in and of itself that maybe somebody's inquiring about. For instance, some people, they start to get into their Hebrew roots, their understanding of the origins of their faith through subjects like the Sabbath or kosher. When you talk about the dietary instructions, and people say, well, we can eat anything because Jesus declared all foods clean, and then you show them, well, no, that's actually just a translator's note, and he never said that, and food is defined actually in the scriptures, and so we shouldn't be eating anything that's not defined as food because it's not food. And so, kosher sometimes is a good open door for people to go down this path. Sabbath is a really big one. The pagan holidays, when people understand that Christmas and Easter are pagan, they start to inquire as to, well, how did this happen? And so, I just encourage you that these books were separated, and I constructed them so that they're a tool. So they're for you all to basically, hand out to people. They're not meant to sit on a bookshelf, and they're meant to be given to people, and just a valuable resource for people to give out if somebody shows an interest in a certain area. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. You can just say, here it is in this book. So, anyways, I just mention that because these are meant for that type of purpose. When you see an interest in a certain area, hand them a book. Sometimes it helps out a lot, because it's hard sometimes just to cover it all in a quick conversation with somebody, but they can take a book home and they can read it at their leisure and go through it then. So give them the book, and then if they want to argue about it, I just ask them to show me in the Bible where Elohim changed the Sabbath or allowed anyone to change any of his commandments, because it's not there. He does not change, and that's why he's described as a rock time and time again in the scriptures. So the bottom line is the followers of Yah rest on this seventh day Sabbath. While much of the world profanes this set-apart day and ascribes it to Saturn, the Roman god of sowing seed and the harvest. And how ironic when you consider the topic of our discussion over the past several weeks. They call it Saturn's Day, and they treat it as Saturn's Day in many cases. To the pagans, Saturn is also the god of wealth and time. And again, quite ironic when we consider all the confusion concerning time and the wealth and prosperity of the culture that we're in, and the emphasis that's given to Saturday. That's sometimes it's just the big shopping day, the big leisure day, the big entertainment day. People go out to dinner, they go out to bars. I mean, it's really, really centered in the focal point of a wealthy, prosperous culture. Well, the followers of Yahuwah recognize that we are in the 12th month of the yearly cycle. Much of the world is acknowledging February, a traditional dead month on the ancient Roman calendar. Remember that there were originally only 10 months on the Roman calendar, and the period between the end of December and the beginning of March was not counted until month 1 was actually created and assigned to January, and February became the second month. Now, just like January is named after Janus or Janus, the month of February is also named after a pagan god, Februus, the Roman god of purification, and the Etruscan god of death and the underworld. Now, I doubt that very few know this, or even care for that matter, but because most of the world is either asleep or distracted, and only the wise are discerning the time and preparing for the Master's return. Now, last week we talked about being wise and bearing fruit. We left off talking about the 5 foolish virgins and the fact that while they were physically capable of being brides, because they were described as virgins, they were not properly prepared, waiting and actually ready for the wedding. Something was missing. They lacked oil, which means they had no light to find their way in the darkness. Now, the scriptures are very clear that the word of Yahweh, his Torah, is the lamp that Yeshua was referring to in the parable of the 10 virgins. Psalm 109, 105 says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." Proverbs 6:23 says, "For the commandment is a lamp, and the Torah a light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life." So this is so crystal clear, yet how many completely neglect the commandments and instructions of Elohim? They'd rather rely on a quote from Paul and consider the commandments, nailed to the cross and done away with. And of course, that absolutely makes no sense. Anybody that understands the history of crucifixions understands that the accused and the person being executed would have their accusations of their crimes nailed to the cross. And so if you walked by and somebody's being crucified, said, "Hey, why is this person being crucified?" You could look right up there on top of the crucifix and see what it was, that murder, thievery, whatever. It would be nailed there above their heads. And so Yeshua basically took on all of our sin. All the reasons we should die, all the reasons we should be punished for our sins, he bore that. And so therefore our punishment, our crimes, our sins are nailed to the cross, and we are washed clean by the blood of Yeshua. That's the point that was trying to be made in that particular scripture, not the fact that the Torah, the commandments, the instructions of Elohim were nailed to the cross. That doesn't even make any sense, and nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, here's a clear word and an unequivocal statement from Yeshua directly on this point. In Matthew 5:17 through 18, he says, "Do not think that I came to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the Torah till all is fulfilled." Well, guess what? Heaven and earth are still here. And if you're waiting for Yeshua to return, then you must acknowledge that all is not fulfilled. And further, he says, "I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill." So fulfillment is not destroying. Fulfilling the Torah is not nailing it to the cross and getting rid of it. So, some people twist this scripture to try to get them where they want to go. But the fact of the matter is very clear that nothing has passed from the Torah. Nothing at all. Nada. It is completely intact and applicable. Now, sure, there's no temple standing in Jerusalem at this time, but that's because it was corrupted and defiled. It was not in compliance with the Torah requirements, and Yeshua declared judgment upon it as well as the house of Judah. And it wasn't the first time. Judah was not obeying the Torah, and therefore they were ejected just like the Torah said would happen. So the fact of the matter is, just because the Israelites were not in the land doesn't mean the Torah is abolished. No, it means the Torah is being fulfilled. It means they sinned. They are being punished, just as indicated by the Torah. And when that punishment is over, or when Messiah comes, and it's all fulfilled, then there will be restoration. So there's no completion of the Torah in the sense that it's ever done away with. It's a cycle that continues. Just as the Romans destroyed the temple, the Babylonians had previously destroyed the temple. And it doesn't mean that Yah changed any of his standard for righteousness and sin just because he allowed a structure built by men to be demolished does not mean that he changed in any way. In fact, we are assured in Malachi that he does not change. Further, it doesn't mean that he changed his Shabbat, built into the very fabric of creation, nor did he allow the Roman Catholic Church to change the seventh-day Sabbath to the first day of the week, Sunday. Of course, the day of the sun would be a holy day to a Roman sun worshiper. It makes sense that observing Sunday Sabbath would be a mark or a sign of the Catholic Church, the religion of Babylon. But if you are not in the religion of Babylon, if you've come out of Babylon, then you need to be demonstrating the sign of the Creator of the universe, and that's the seventh-day Sabbath. So nothing, even the death and the resurrection of Yeshua. I know some people try to claim, well, Jesus rose on Sunday. Well, first of all, that's not true. He didn't rise on Easter Sunday. He rose on Shabbat, and I would talk about that in the Walk in the Light book titled The Messiah, where we go through with minute detail his last week. In fact, we even talked about his last week a little bit in the previous newsletter. And a lot happened, a lot culminated in that final week when he was cut off in the midst of the week on a Wednesday. And then he rose according to the sign of Jonah on Shabbat. And of course, how appropriate that he rose on Shabbat. So even the whole process of the death and resurrection of Yeshua would not have anything to do with changing the Sabbath, even if he did rise on a Sunday, which he didn't. But even if he did rise on a Sunday, that would be no basis for changing the Sabbath to Sunday. And I've heard people say, well, every day is the Sabbath. Well, no, every day is not the Sabbath. The scriptures say that the seventh day is the Sabbath. We don't rest 7 days out of the week. We rest 1 day out of the week. And we are specifically commanded to work 6 days. So every day can't be the Sabbath. That makes no sense. And again, this is the kind of stuff that people just throw around without even thinking about. But it's critical, to toss these arguments out and just look at the scriptures and follow the truth. So, we all must ask ourselves, what sign do you carry and present to the world? And signs are important, especially the ones set in place by the Creator. We know from the first week of creation that the lights in the heavens are for signs. And we read about that in Genesis 1:14. It says, then Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and appointed times, which is Moedim in Hebrew. Now, many English translations say for seasons, but that's not an accurate translation, because when you think of seasons, you're thinking of winter, spring, summer, fall, but that's not what the word Moedim means. The word Moedim in Hebrew, it means appointed times, and those appointed times, I talk about them regularly, specifically in the Walk in the Light series book titled Appointed Times. But if you're not familiar with that and you want to get a quick overview of them, Leviticus 23 is a great place to start, because it lays out the entire cycle of the appointed times. It talks about the weekly cycle, the weekly Sabbath cycle, first of all, and then it goes into the annual appointed times that we celebrate in a yearly cycle. So the two lights, the two great lights, the lesser light and the greater light, the sun and the moon, are for signs and appointed times and for days and for years. Now, last week I talked about how the wise men from the east discerned certain signs that led them to Jerusalem, seeking out the Messiah of Israel. Now, here's another tradition. If around Christmas time, which was not when Yeshua was born, we talk about that in many different teachings and different messages, but you'll see three wise men, as if three wise men came from the east and brought three different gifts to Yeshua. But the fact of the matter is, these were likely Parthians from the Parthian Empire, and they likely came with many, many wise men and probably a small army as well, because we know that Jerusalem was on edge when they appeared, because there was a lot of tension between the Roman Empire and the Parthian Empire, and so they might not have, been prepared or known what their intentions were. But there were many, many wise men, and there was a large group of them most likely. And I discussed the various signs that occurred that brought them there in the Walk in the Light book entitled The Messiah, because they were looking up, they were discerning signs, and then they knew, okay, something happened, and so we are going to now go and see the King of Israel. And where would you go to see the King? Well, you go to Jerusalem to visit the King. And as we anticipate the return of the Messiah, the wise will also be looking at signs. In fact, that's what we're doing when we're keeping track of time and rehearsing the appointed times. We're looking at the signs, we're looking at the lights, we're keeping track of time, and we're rehearsing. We're rehearsing for his return. As we discern the times and understand that we are around the 120th Jubilee, many seek to know exactly when the Master will return, but I don't believe that's the point of the exercise. The point is not to know the exact moment of his return so you can get ready right before he returns. No, the point is to be ready at all times, because you don't know when he's going to return, and you don't want to be caught off guard. For instance, even though Daniel was provided with a timeline by Gabriel, and we were given a general time and there was an expectation of when the Messiah would come, no one knew the precise moment of his birth or even the location. For instance, the wise men were looking for the king, so they went to Jerusalem. But he was born, we know, in Bethlehem, and they probably showed up maybe years later when they visited the child in the house. It most likely was not the infant in the sukkah or the manger in Bethlehem. And this sign of his birth and the date of his birth was actually confirmed later on through Revelation, as we're told of the sign that happened when he was born. In Revelation 12:1-2, it says, "Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth." Now, this great sign involved the constellation Betula, and again, I talk about that in depth in the book The Messiah, but it appeared in the skies above Jerusalem when Yeshua was born on the appointed time of Yom Teruah, the day of blasting that we read about in Leviticus 23:23-25. At that moment, those who were rehearsing the appointed times of Yom Teruah and sounding their shofars were actually involved in a celestial birthday party, the birth of the king, and most didn't even know it. In fact, for all we know, it was the shepherds were told that the Messiah was born, but everybody else maybe thought they were still rehearsing, and they didn't even realize that as they're sounding the shofars and announcing the coming of the king, they think they're still rehearsing, and yet it was actually being fulfilled at that moment. So even though there was an expectation, many completely missed Yeshua because he didn't fit into their religious paradigm. And I can assure you that there will be many church-going Christians who will not be ready for the return of Yeshua, because they're caught up in a religion rather than his renewed covenant. They bear the sign of the Catholic Church instead of the Creator of all things, and most do not heed his words or even know his name. Most are not expecting Yeshua HaMashiach. They are looking for Jesus Christ. And while they're busy being religious, they may find themselves shut out of the wedding and in a place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's a narrow gate, and Yeshua warned that many will seek to enter and will not be able. Last week I quoted that warning of Yeshua from Matthew 7. Here's another warning from the text of Luke. It says, "Strive to enter through the narrow gate, for many, I say to you, will seek to enter and will not be able. When once the master of the house has risen up and shut the door, and you begin to stand outside and knock at the door, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open up for us,' and he will answer and say to you, 'I do not know you, where you are from,' then you will begin to say, 'We ate and drank in your presence, and you taught in our streets.' But he will say, 'I tell you, I do not know you. where you are from. Depart from me, all you workers of iniquity. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the prophets in the kingdom of Elohim, and yourselves thrust out. They will come from the east and the west and from the north and the south, and sit down in the kingdom of Elohim. And indeed there are last who will be first, and there are first who will be last. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the prophets were all under the so-called Old Covenant. How did they get into the kingdom, but people who lived with Yeshua get shut out? They actually ate and drank with him. They heard his teachings. They think they know him, but he does not know them. He says there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Again, it all comes down to the fact that they are workers of iniquity. That's how they're defined. Also known as those who practice lawlessness, that I often mention in Matthew 7:23. It's the same thing. Workers of iniquity and those who practice lawlessness are the ones who disobey the commandments. They're the ones who say, "Oh no, Jesus, he abolished the law. The law was nailed to the cross. We're no longer under the law. We don't have to obey the Torah, the commandments." Now, as we discussed last week, you can go to church every Sunday, you can sing hymns, pray, and even manifest signs and miracles, but that doesn't equate to good fruit, and that's not going to get you into the kingdom. The blood of Yeshua provides entry into the kingdom, but once you gain access, you need to abide by the rules of the house, and that is the Torah. That's why the Passover is at the very beginning of the annual cycle of the appointed times, which they actually provide the roadmap back to Eden. But the Passover is when we acknowledge that the shed blood of the Lamb, and we know that Yeshua fulfilled the pattern of the Lamb of Elohim. Once that blood is put on the mantle and the doorposts, we recognize that that blood covers the firstborn in that house from death. Okay, so that provides the needed atonement from death. So that's the entry point to this covenant journey. But from there on in, you need to be following the commandments diligently in order to stay within the house, to stay in that covenant house. If you refuse to obey, you'll be thrown out. We read a stark warning in Matthew 22:11 through 13. It says, "But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have a wedding garment. So he said to him, 'Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, 'Bind him hand and foot, take him away and cast him in the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" Here again, we read about weeping and gnashing of teeth by people who wanted to get into the wedding. Now, we should all be preparing for the wedding, the marriage supper of the Lamb, and this is the culmination of the appointed times, and it's the reason why we rehearse. We participate in the rehearsals built into the appointed times so that we're constantly anticipating and preparing. If you're not involved in that process, then you may find yourself in with the 5 foolish virgins. Many people claim to follow the Messiah, but they do not do what he says. And here's what they can expect to hear from him if they don't repent and be zealous for his word. He'll say, "But why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do the things which I say?" Those who do not do the things which he says are like those who build without a foundation. When the storms come, the house gets wiped out. There's destruction. So we don't just believe in our hearts, we express our belief through our lives. We demonstrate that we believe him by what we do, and if we truly love him, we keep his commandments. That's specifically what he says in John 14:15. When we walk in obedience and diligently observe his appointed times at the correct time, we will be found ready when he returns. And that's why I emphasize so much getting the calendar right. This is not just optional, a smorgasbord of, oh, well, this group's going to do it this day and another group's going to do it another day. And, I'm just going to go to all these events and all these feasts and it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to, do it all. No. Again, that's confusion, and Elohim is not an Elohim of confusion. He operates his calendar specifically based upon the signs that he's provided us with, and we are supposed to follow those signs. Now, the point is not necessarily to know the exact time when Yeshua is going to return. The repeated focus, as I said, of Yeshua's parables is that we don't know precisely when he will return. In fact, while he was sitting on the Mount of Olives and speaking the words of the Olivet Discourse, shortly before telling the parable of the 10 virgins, he stated, "But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the messengers of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days of Noah, the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your master is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." The fact that he compares his coming with the days of Noah is no coincidence. The last time he came, judging the house of Judah, when he returns, he will be judging the nations. Now, another version of this message in Mark adds a little different information. It says, "But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the messengers in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Take heed, watch, and pray, for you do not know when the time is. It is like a man going to a far country, who left his house and gave authority to his servants and to each his work, and commanded the doorkeeper to watch. Watch, therefore, for you do not know when the master of the house is coming, in the evening, at midnight, at the crowing of the rooster, or in the morning, lest coming suddenly he find you sleeping. And what I say to you, I say to all, watch." 4 times he uses the word watch. So the prevailing warning is to watch and be prepared if you want to be ready. And remember, watch and to tend those were the commandments that Adam was given in the garden, and nothing has changed. He was told to watch it and tend the garden. We're to be watching and tending what he's given us here. Our set-apart space where we put our mezuzah on the doorposts of our house and on our gates. We watch and tend just like Adam was supposed to watch and tend. The prophets are supposed to be watching, warning, and pointing people to the narrow path. Sadly, most people who call themselves watchmen or prophets are failing miserably at their job. While they may be able to expose some of the works of darkness that are going on in the world, they're failing to point people to the covenant path. Many of these so-called watchmen on the internet and prophets don't even know the name of the Messiah or the name of the Father. And how is it that they can have so much intel and inside information and not even know the name of the one they claim to serve? So much for their intelligence and their resources. Yeshua refers to these types of people as wolves dressed up like sheep. What good is their warning if they offer no solution, or their solution still leads to destruction? I mean, where does it get a person if they know all the wiles of the devil and what the enemy is doing and what the workers of darkness are doing? What good does it do if you're not walking on the covenant path, and if you're not under the protection of Elohim? If you're obeying his commandments and walking on that narrow path, then you don't even have to worry about what the enemy is doing, because you're going to be guided and protected by Elohim. So I see so many people completely distracted because they need to know the cutting edge information of all the things that are going on in the world, when they really just need to be focusing on obedience and bearing fruit. And that's why I've been emphasizing it over the past several years, because those are the things that the master is looking for. And if you're not doing that, then you're going to be like the 5 foolish virgins who weren't ready, weren't doing the work. And immediately after warning about the 5 foolish virgins, Yeshua again instructed us to watch, followed by another important lesson of the kingdom. He says, "Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But the one who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I've gained 2 more talents besides them. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his master answered and said, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have abundance. But to him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Here again, we read about someone weeping and gnashing their teeth. And this is a sign of despair and frustration, because they realized they missed out. This person was described as a servant. He was described as a servant, but he failed to please the master. He was therefore not ready when the master returned. Yeshua tells us who the wise servant is. He says, Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his master made ruler over his household, to give them food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing. Assuredly, I say to you that he will make him ruler over all his goods. But if that evil servant says in his heart, My master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and will cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Can you see a pattern here? The point is that we're supposed to be found doing, bearing fruit and multiplying. It doesn't matter how much you have been given to start. It only matters that you produce 100-fold return. There's no difference in the reward between the ones that were given 5 and 2. They were given according to their abilities, and it's what they did with what they were given that was important. You have not been given life, truth, and the opportunity for redemption just so you can enjoy everyday life and feel good about yourself. You are expected to reap a bountiful crop. Now the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Make sure that you are involved in the harvest. Now, speaking of the harvest and laborers, last week we bought Brother Thomas in Kenya a motorcycle, and the country has been restricting public transportation for the unvaccinated. Now he can freely travel to more small villages and sow more seed, and he has a wonderful new tool, and we are expecting an increase in his yield as a result. And here's a picture of Brother Thomas with his son, and they are enjoying the new motorcycle that he just brought to the property. And I'm sure he'll be putting that to good use. And I want to say thank you to all who support Shema Israel for making this possible. We've been supporting Kenya and other countries for many, many years, and we have a very active prison ministry, and we have a lot of things going on as we're trying to bear fruit for the kingdom. And so we appreciate those who support this work. So we have the funds to be able to do these things. And if you're interested in helping out, you can always go to the website and make a donation, and we certainly appreciate that. We need to all take an inventory regarding the resources, the talents that we've been given, and are we burying them or are we multiplying them? And this is something that we need to be assessing because the master is going to come, and when he returns, he's expecting a return on his investment, and he will be settling accounts. Next week, we'll examine the culmination of Yeshua's message and the kind of fruit that he considers to be good. Until then, Barakot and Shavua Tov. And if you are not receiving this newsletter or not on our mailing list, I recommend you go to our website, www.shemaisrael.net, and you will have an opportunity to have the newsletter emailed to you each week, because that comes out first, and then I do the recording after that. And I just, as a final note, this past week, a dear friend and brother in Costa Rica named Walter passed on, and we've spent many years in Israel and in Costa Rica, and Walter and his wife Florence hosted us in their home many times, and were just very gracious to us as we were in that country and exploring and traveling around. And so we ask that you keep Florence in your prayers, that she would have the comfort and the shalom of Yah during this time of mourning. Until next week, Barakot and Shalom.